It was just Sundays only, and there was a lot of good, skilled disc players. John Kirkland, Ray Van Sickle, Rick LeBeau, people that were already doing other disc events, and we just got together and played Ultimate. 20 people probably every Sunday. And our first outside competition was actually traveling to the 77 Westerns at Irvine. At that time, was anybody that wanted to go could show up. I think 11 teams were there.
Where the open men's team was the Flow, the San Diego Flow, FLO. And that consisted of guys like Tom Peel and Dwayne Freres and Jimmy Guerreri and Jimmy DeJohnny and a handful of guys that kind of kept it going from 80 to probably 82 as the Flow. And it wasn't until 1983, when a series of guys from the East. 82. Okay, so
they had two teams that.
So fall of '82, some guys came out from the East Coast, and those guys would be like Timba, Durso, Carmen, Scapatulo, Cricket, guy named Nooch, and they came out from the borough, and they realized that there was good athletic talent in San Diego, but they also realized that the guys didn't really know how to win. And these guys had already won at the borough, and they set about the process of trying to figure out who on the Flow was a winner, who could actually make it go, and where they needed to grab new talent. And they kind of crashed the Flow practices and put together a group of guys from the borough and the best guys from the Flow, and then some cats that they pulled from UCSD's team, which included guys like John Sione, Bullet Pins, and some other guys, and we formed spinoffs. So that was kind of a migration in late '82 into '83, and in '83 was the first real year that it was fully formed, and that was a real team. Those guys were seasoned national competitors, so at least enough of them were, and they had taught the rest of the guys how to win and what was important about figuring out how to win, and they did quite well that year at Nationals in '83 in New Orleans. They tried to do the same thing in '84 and didn't quite have the same horsepower. There were some guys that had left in '84, but that team kind of had a 2-year run, kind of '83 and '84 at the national level.
The first time I ever found a team was summer of '78, and the history of that team is that there was a group of guys who went to school together, and their names were Gary Fiala, Matt Ferguson, and Bruce Allison. And then Bruce had a younger brother, Scott Allison. So, and then Gary Fiala had an older brother, Ron Fiala. So the story was that Ron had read in a magazine or something about Ultimate. And so then he got his group of friends to start playing some semblance of Ultimate at a high school nearby. And then at some point they found out about Foothill. This is probably 76, 77. And then somehow they found out about Foothill in Santa Barbara. But the unique thing about the Hot Sox was that they were actually formed themselves as a Frisbee club. So back then, these Frisbee clubs like to do all the events, like freestyle, golf. And one of my earliest memories was we had some sort of field meet with Foothill where we played guts, ultimate, and maybe double disc court all in one day. And actually, now that I think about it, in the ultimate game, I was told to guard Stork, and they threw up like, I don't know, 6 or 7 that he obviously snagged over me. And I finally was able to block one, and my team went nuts because nobody could stop Stuart because he's tall and athletic.
That's the only one we remember.
But the thing was that it was a field meet, or I don't know, is that what you called it?
Yeah, it was a field meet.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, that one block that you had has been memorialized. Do you know that picture of you diving out? I mean, that's the block.
No, that was a different day.
That's Star Stanley.
But, yeah, so it was actually a Frisbee club, and our primary focus was Ultimate. And then our main competitors that I recall were primarily Foothill, Santa Barbara, and then La Mirada actually had a pretty
Oh, yes, that's a pretty big,
Yeah.
the red jacket.
And then Stan Mangone.
Was the Claremont colleges, were Pitzer brain eaters?
No,
Were they
after the fact. No, later.
Not up
They
yet?
just won
Yeah.
the Division III national championships not too long ago.
Oh,
You know, I actually, Joe, I mean, in arriving in Santa Barbara in '81 to play, having been exposed to Ultimate in Massachusetts and knowing that we only had a few months out of the year to play quality Ultimate, I'm like, I really need more months of warm weather. So I set out in February from Massachusetts with my thumb out. And when I arrived, there was a young group that sort of adopted me. They like to call themselves the Bums, but this was Doug Salter, Dan Harrington, and they were pretty avid freestylists. And like I said, I mean, the whole league thing at that point in the early '80s hadn't dissipated, and the multi-event happening was still in place. So there were many tournaments that you went to, and not only was there freestyle or ultimate, but there was distance and maximum time aloft, all in it, which is why we actually lost Jimmy Herrick to so many of our ultimate games because he had to go do other events and then come back and be on your team for a half a game. I think having him for the whole tournament would have won us the tournament, but he had to go do other stuff because the guy is amazing. But when I arrived in Santa Barbara in the early '80s, the multi-disc event was still largely in place. Met the Coloradicals out there, Bill Wright, Doug Brannigan, Castiglia, and I got better at my disc skills because of the freestyle opportunities that were out there. I never got good at it, but I learned a lot more about Frisbee because it wasn't just ultimate at the time, still in the early '80s. A lot of beach and just some great opportunities with some great athletes that weren't just ultimate players out there. But I think it did dissipate as the mid-'80s sort of came forth.
We didn't know until we played a team from the East Coast how we stacked up or what the feeling was. And the first game that we played against an East Coast team was Penn State in '77. And then it was another year before we played another team from the East Coast, and that was Cornell in '78. So during that time frame, we felt confident we were good, but we didn't really know. We had competition on the West Coast, but no exposure to much beyond just the West Coast. So it was an interesting era because we were aware of the East Coast and the proliferation of teams and the density of teams and the quality of what we heard about, but we didn't really know how that stacked up. And until we played the LA Frisbee Club and had our first game, I mean, you know, we were playing for fun only, but clearly competition was at the back of our minds. Once we played them and were able to be successful, I think we had a feeling that we were good and have somebody prove us, you know, that they were better. So I think we were confident, but we didn't really know. We never played anything but wanting to win, and we were very serious from the second we started. I mean, you know, you can apply a laissez-faire or however you want to attitude, but we never had it. We were always dead serious. I mean, people were doing what they were doing in terms of recreational things, but the bottom line is there was never a time that it wasn't anything but serious, and so I don't think that even is an applicable question, really, kind of.
Because it wasn't really East Coast, West Coast. There was
there was so much leakage during this period that there were a lot of principal players from the East Coast that were already out here. And so they brought a lot of that culture along of knowing what it was like on the East Coast. And like TK said, I mean, when we established Foothill Institute, I mean, we set it up to win championships. I mean, that we weren't just looking to extend the fun of playing on the East Coast. We set it up to win.
So, all right.
I just want to respond to one thing in terms of, like, earlier you had a question about the difference between then and now and how easy it was to find a game. That struck me. How easy was it to find a game? You're dying to play, not amongst yourselves, but somebody else. And this was a little bit later after I'd been to Santa Barbara and come back to Massachusetts. There was a party at my house, and everybody was dancing and having a good time, and a gentleman came up to me, an Ultimate player that played for UMass, and he said, I heard there's a small tournament in Boston tomorrow, and it was probably 25 degrees at the time. Wow.
Cheers.
From the early member of one of the most amazing, you wouldn't know it on the street, but he's one of the most competitive players you'll ever meet, Dave Barkin. However, and actually, I don't know if he was in fact in the East Coast or not. So anyways, Eric Kehoe comes up to me, and I hear there's a small tournament in Boston tomorrow. But the only way we can find out, I have a phone number, and he pulls this torn piece of paper out of his pocket, and it literally was crumpled and torn. We barely could make out the number, and we ran probably 3/4 of a mile in 20-degree weather to a phone booth, where we didn't have a phone working in our house. We probably didn't pay our bill, and got to the phone booth, and we called, or it might have been Buzz Laughlin or somebody from Aerodisc, and he was in Amherst, Mr. P. So we got whoever it was picked up and said, yes, in fact, we are having a game tomorrow. Would you like to join us? And that was how we all decided to hop in our cars in whatever condition we were in the next day in this brutal weather and drive 2 hours to Boston and play. And that was the nature of finding a game at that time. And now it's all via email. There's tournaments set up, there's fees. And so that was kind of a very adventurous way to find something that we loved to do back in that era. And it was a dial-up phone, and it was a dime a phone call. Put that into perspective.
That's it.
1979.
Yes.
And the Klingons.
Correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit of the history of the Klingons. Tell Joe a little bit of the history of the Klingons. What disc did you start playing on?
So I just started playing with them probably a year or two after they started, and I only played with them for probably like 9 months. It was a pretty good group of athletes, but I didn't really like the way they played, so I would. And I just started. This was my first team, but I just wanted to do something different. But what did you want to know more about that?
So, as the team developed, what disc did you first start playing?
Oh, the disc that we first started playing with was the 165, for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
And tell me about the Klingons. I mean,
They were like a bunch of guys who seemed like they played football more than any other sports. I mean, if you look at the athletes that were on that team, they seemed pretty competitive as basketball and football athletes. I thought I liked it. It was, for me, playing them was just about learning the sport. Once I realized how much I loved the sport, I realized how much I didn't really like playing with them. Is that fair? I mean, there's not really much to say about the Klingons. I mean, the Jam was a cool team because it was a spin-off team, and it was fun kind of revolution from what we thought they were doing. And
He had like punk haircuts.
Everyone got punk haircuts. And
that's what year?
that was 79, and we wanted to play zone and man, experiment with the game and do really interesting things because we played different sports and they seemed like they were just doing something that was boring. So it was fun for us. That was like a first opportunity to start a new team, but that was like, just like all of us. I mean, it was one of those times where you feel like you're inventing something for the first time, and that was exciting.